Hello and welcome to the technically first episode of Yapping about MMOs, where I play an MMO and talk about things that I like and don't like about the game. The goal of this is to play the game enough for me to have a decent grasp of the game's mechanics and systems. MMOs tend to be structured in a way where the game doesn't really open up to you until you hit max level, beat the campaign, or pass some other point. Now, I don't have infinite time on my hands, so I'm not reaching raid level or even level cap for every MMO that I play. However, I put too much time into the MMOs that I make videos on to truly call them first impressions. So, my happy medium is this series, where I play until I hit whatever arbitrary point I decide and yap about how I feel about the game. So I've been playing Star Wars The Old Republic, or SWTOR for short, and I've been playing for a little bit. So far, I've been having a good time. The game's your standard tab target MMO with the holy trinity of tanks, healers, and DPS, fit with open world exploration, instance dungeons, and raids that I haven't done yet. The Old Republic was initially developed and released in 2010 by BioWare, a studio known for their story-rich titles like Mass Effect and Dragon Age. But in 2023, development and upkeep of the game was transferred to a company called Broadsword, known for their continued maintenance and development of legacy MMOs like Ultima Online and Dark Age of Camelot. Typical of BioWare titles, this game has a heavy emphasis on its story. I'm talking fully voiced main quest, branching dialogue, and a karma system. And because of this, it's hands down one of the best I've played in an MMO. The narrative that you experience is dependent on the faction you choose, either the Republic or the Empire. Then, after that, your origin story. These choices are made on character creation, which is a straightforward process. When you create your character, your first choice is your alignment, Galactic Republic or Sith Empire, light side or dark side. Then you choose your origin story, then advanced class. Wait, what the fuck? I'm not gonna lie, the term advanced class threw me off and I thought the origin stories affected the advanced classes in some way, so I spent longer than I should have just flipping between origin stories and comparing the highlights of the advanced classes. I was wrong in both of my assumptions, by the way. The origin stories don't affect the advanced classes, and these aren't class highlights. They're skill trees. Fucking what? I guess I should have been able to intuitively figure it out faster. I mean, the classes in Guild Wars are called professions and in Final Fantasy jobs, so advanced class isn't all that out there of a naming convention. But the skill trees thing didn't fully click to me until I actually started playing the game. I mean, there could just be a line of text there that says class trees to avoid confusion. Regardless, it's not that big of a deal. It really only took me like 5 minutes total max to figure this all out, but this is the perfect segue into one of this game's flaws. It's old as fuck. Okay, what I mean by that is this game has gone through a lot of overhauls and revisions over the years, and there are holdovers and remnants of those previous systems in-game today, and some of them clash with what's playable now. Case in point, the character creation. Yeah, before I started playing the game, your origin story was your base class, and after a certain point in leveling, you got to choose your advanced class, which used to be exclusive to specific origin stories. I prefer what's in-game now over the previous iteration, but the current UI is still a minor friction point that happens before you even load into the world. This age game issue doesn't really flare up that often, but I'll be bringing this up more and expounding on it a few more times throughout this video. As of writing this, I've completed the origin story of two different characters, a Jedi Consular and a Sith Warrior. As you could tell, I like lightsaber classes. Each class has a mirrored version on the opposite alignment that function identically to each other. The only differences between the two are cosmetic things, like animations, ability effects, and names. For example, on the Empire side you have the Sith Marauder, which is the same as the Jedi Sentinel on the Republic side. Overall, I feel that the story isn't as grand as some of the other games in the genre like Final Fantasy XIV or even Guild Wars 2, but SWTOR's campaign is much more engaging and intimate to me. You aren't playing some gigantic strategy to take out some god or world-ending threat. You're, for the most part, handling personal matters related to your class's origin. Like my Jedi Consular's plot was just driven around spreading the good Jedi gospel and establishing diplomatic relations, while my Sith Warrior spent most of her time killing traitors to the Empire and killing in the name of her master. This resulted in me feeling a deeper connection to the narrative because I'm the focus of it in a way that doesn't just make me the best person in existence or the only person capable of solving problems. A majority of them in my campaigns are problems that are directly related to my character, giving me a more personal reason to care. And since this was a BioWare title, there's branching dialogue and action paths that have tangible impacts on the story. I was so engaged with the narrative because it really felt like I was the one with agency in it, but most importantly, my character felt like an actual person. There's enough dialogue options in each class's story for me to headcanon my character's personality and roleplay based on what I thought they would do. I think this aspect of character building is lost in almost every other MMO because their quests don't have this breadth of choice to them. Sure, you may get dialogue options and slightly diverging quest lines in other MMOs, but not really to the extent of the Old Republic. Not only are these choices reflected in the story, but also in your alignment, which is the game's karma system. Alignment is an in-game stat that isn't used that much besides titles and certain gear colors being locked behind it, but I think that's okay. It's something that adds an extra bit of roleplay that fits in universe, and I'm all for features that keep you immersed, especially since it doesn't make an impact in combat. Oh, and did I mention the quests and your character are fully voice acted? No meme, I don't think I've had a main or side quest that didn't have voice acting in it, and I'm honestly impressed. MMOs are massive play spaces, and that's expanded even more here due to there being multiple explorable planets, so I found it astonishing that I haven't come across a single NPC with dialogue that wasn't voiced. Not to mention the massive amount of dialogue in the main story quests as well. And it doesn't feel phoned in either. I have to give big props to BioWare for their voice direction, but doubly so for the actors themselves for going above and beyond with the voice acting. It helps keep me in the world, and makes the story that much more engaging. The way that the Old Republic handles its campaign feels so unique to the MMO genre that I firmly believe this is one of the big selling points of this game. As you progress in the campaign, you eventually unlock companions. From what I've seen so far, each origin story gets multiple unique companions. Each of them has their own likes and dislikes, as well as comments in the main story that your character can respond to. There's something that keeps the story feeling natural. I found myself starting to care more about certain companions between my characters, sometimes hoping they like what dialogue option I picked. They even have their own side quest, which largely boil down to just conversations between you and said companion, but it's still more insight to them as a character, and I appreciate that. They can also approve or disapprove of certain dialogue choices you make, but this is mostly just flavor. And here comes another aged game bullet point. I did some digging, and apparently companions could leave you if they didn't like you enough, but that feature was altered to what we have now. I could see why this was a system that changed, but I feel the current version of companion affinity leaves some situations feeling a bit silly. For example, the first companion that I got on my Sith Inquisitor was Vet. She's given to me as a slave, so she has a shot caller that I have the option to use on her a surprising amount of times in the story.
Jailer, I think she needs a little more juice.
Alright, one more for the road.
Enough!
Let's give this higher setting a test run. Speak when spoken to, slave.
Ow! Bantha poo! What was that for?
For losing your focus and slacking off.
I haven't slacked off. Look.
Here's my thank you, slave. Choke on it.
Sorry!
She obviously hates it when I channel Palpatine into her neck, so I get the little Vet disapproves every time I do it. She has a few side quests in which she asks me to take the collar off of her, which I respond to in kind. Do this over the course of enough of her side quests, and she'll eventually tell you she won't be listening to you anymore. So what happens after that? Absolutely fucking nothing. She still gathers for me like a pro. It's a little silly and brings me slightly out of immersion, but overall it's nothing egregious. I think story-wise I find the companions on the Empire side more compelling. For the most part, on the Republic side, I got companions that felt like bland goody-two-shoes characters that just wanted to help the Jedi. But since the entire power system of the Empire is built around just being the strongest and backstabbing everyone, there's more room for interesting companions. From my one Sith Inquisitor, I found different companions compelling for different reasons. Vet because I'm an awful person, Lieutenant Pierce because he's set up as a shady character in the beginning and he actually does end up backstabbing you, and especially Jaisa, because she's a Jedi that I slowly worked to turning her to the dark side. I foiled her plans, killed people close to her, and finally, as an ultimate act of loyalty, made her kill her master, and from there, I made her discover her love for killing and causing harm. I just wish there was more room for these interesting characters on the Republic side. They're just kind of generic good guys. There may be cooler companions in other origin stories though, as I've only finished one of them on each faction. The biggest plus to companions is the sheer utility they provide. If your inventory has junk items in it, you could send your companion away for a little while and they'll sell them for you. You could send them on gathering missions to get materials, and crafting I think is done exclusively through them as well. They could fill any role with a click of a button, meaning you could explore the open world and quest as a healer without having to worry about the damage you deal because your companion can cover it. Maybe you're a brain-dead DPS that can't move out of red circles. Well, fear not, because your companion can keep you healed up. It's a great addition to the game and makes exploring a lot more convenient, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. My biggest gripe with companions is how cookie-cutter they are in combat. They all have the ability to cover each role, and their skills are the exact same, so they all perform exactly the same in combat. While it's great that all companions can be whatever role you want, it's kind of lame they don't have anything they specialize in, or at least have different skills. This is more than just homogenization, this is complete fucking osmosis. I'd even take them just using skills from player classes. Shit, I could even see that feeling really cool. I think it's incredibly boring that they all have the exact same function, and the game gave me no reason to switch companions, as there's no gameplay experimentation with them. Again, this is something that I think is a holdover from a previous iteration of companions, as even the gear they equip doesn't give them stats, so I assume that they used to only fill a singular role but was changed to what I see today. What companions are right now isn't something that I think is necessarily bad, I'm just a bit conflicted. On one hand, I'd be kind of sad if I couldn't just take my favorite with me everywhere at no consequence, but on the other hand, it's kind of fucking lame that in story your companions are your crew, people that you've recruited because of their skills, but in gameplay that isn't reflected at all. It unfortunately turned every companion besides my favorite into just life skilling bots. And while I'm on how companions work in combat, I should talk about how combat in the Old Republic works for the player. The game's your standard tab target MMO. Click on an enemy to target them and use your abilities on your hotbar to fight. The global cooldowns are fairly low, so I was constantly taking actions during fights, even at low levels. In between that, there's also off-global cooldown abilities, and some are unlocked pretty early on when leveling, so I always felt involved, even at the early levels. The animations felt very expressive and fluid, and the feedback from landing attacks are incredibly satisfying. The sounds of lightsabers hitting an enemy with that wave-like trail from my slashes is something that triggers a dopamine response in me every time. A lot of abilities can be cast while moving, and abilities where you're rooted in place have fairly short channel duration, so there's a surprising amount of mobility in combat. I don't think it's as mobile as Guild Wars 2, but it's definitely close. Each class also has 3 different class trees, basically subclasses, that change up their playstyle, sometimes even their role. For example, Sentinel has the class trees Watchman, Combat, and Focus, where Watchman is about maintaining dots, Combat is about doing burst damage, and Concentration provides a hybrid between the two. They all get access to slightly different abilities and traits that fill their niche out, and while the rotations, at least for now, are only slightly different feeling, it's enough to give a nice bit of variety to each class. This is something that isn't weighted well though, because there's a lot of class trees that are basically a different flavor of the other, while some completely change your playstyle, even role. So while the Sentinel gets 3 slightly different flavors of DPS, Jedi Sage gets to choose between DPS and healing options. Despite that, the combat experience was great. The act of just hitting things was fun, and trying to figure out a rotation and chaining my abilities together was satisfying. Even if I was just doing trash pulls and spamming AoEs, there was still an oomph factor to it that kept me engaged. And if I ever got bored with my specialization, I could just change my class tree. The combat early on had me wanting to try out dungeons. I wanted to see what more structured combat encounters looked like. Flashpoints are the name for dungeons, and they're really fun. There's a ton of them to run, and each of them felt unique. It didn't seem like they followed a set formula for their layouts, as in, it didn't feel like every dungeon was the same sequence of trash mobs into mini-boss into final boss. A majority of flashpoints are leading you through fairly linear corridors, but the variety of each run comes from the story and life skilling involvement. Each dungeon has multiple cutscenes in them, and some will even affect what path you end up going through. In some cases, shortcuts can be accessed if you have the necessary life skill required to interact with it. I enjoy the variation of dungeons. It makes replaying them feel more rewarding because there's alternate dialogue that I could see, and there's more to it besides path number 2 with a different mini-boss. I like the mid-dungeon cutscenes. They give room for a bit of RP, and if you don't like them, you can choose to opt out, though you do still need to wait on your party to finish before you can progress. Dialogue is randomly rolled for what person's choices are played out in mission. However, you'll still gain the karma for your own individual choices if you make an alignment affecting decision. The cutscenes aren't that long, so it's not like they're eating away at your time, and I think it's cool how the dialogue works. It gives everyone the chance to make a choice, and it's kind of funny making a dialogue choice only to immediately see you roll a 1 and the next person rolls like 115. Flashpoints are unlocked as soon as you leave the tutorial planet, and while I think it's nice to have dungeon options available from the start, it's another double-edged sword. I didn't have many abilities unlocked by then, and I was still piecing together the combat, so I chose not to play until I got to a higher level. I think I was around level 20-ish when I decided to start running flashpoints, and a majority of the time I was queued into a dungeon with endgame players running flashpoints for dailies. In those, I didn't really do much, and the combat side of those runs felt bland because my party nuked the trash mobs by the time I landed 3 hits on a single one of them. There was also the occasional time when my party would mount up when I didn't have one and almost kill a boss without me even touching it. This isn't anything that I really blame players for, as most of them would slow down if I asked, and I know that endgame players just want to get dailies done as quick as possible. My blame goes largely to the game. Flashpoints will automatically scale you to level cap, but you won't have access to any of your future abilities. I think that's kind of weird because what's the point of level syncing you up when you don't have any of the tools that go along with it? Personally, I would have preferred it if players were just level synced down akin to Final Fantasy XIV, where you can't use your higher level skills in low level dungeons. That way, the lower level players would be at a more even playing field with high level players. I could be wrong about this, because maybe the game's new player population is astronomically low compared to the veteran population, and a change like I suggested would make running low level flashpoints not worth it for vets, which could lead to a dungeon queue void for low tier dungeons. I'm not sure, and to my Old Republic enjoyers, I'd like to hear your opinion about it in the comments. Thankfully, you can just do flashpoints with your friends, and it isn't even much of a hassle. Even if you don't have other people you know to play with, additional abilities are unlocked pretty frequently, so it wouldn't take that long to get to a point where you can more actively participate in dungeons. When I was able to engage with the game, I had a lot of fun with the dungeon encounters. The trash mobs were your standard MMO fodder enemies that didn't really have deep mechanics to them besides the occasional cast you can interrupt, or the AoE you'd want to stand out of. Which isn't a problem because trash packs are meant to be fodder enemies. The real engagement lies in the boss and puzzle encounters. There weren't a lot of puzzle encounters in my time playing, but there was one that stuck out to me. I was running the Colicoid War Games flashpoint with 2 friends. We couldn't get a queue to pop, so we decided to just run it with the 3 of us. We had a tank, a healer, and a DPS, so we thought we'd make it out okay. And things were going great. Until we hit the barrier room. Multiple barriers stop player movement until someone activates a terminal corresponding to a specific barrier. Normally, a full party would have people in position ready to flip switches for someone else to pass. However, since we were one short, we had to figure out and maneuver our way around the barriers using unintended platforming, and dying to get ourselves back to where we needed to be. What normally would have been a 2-minute puzzle section turned into 10 minutes of comedy between friends, and I love it when dungeons get wacky with their puzzle mechanics. There were a couple bosses that were just DPS fights, but a lot of them had mechanics that were dangerous to the whole party, regardless of their level. For example, in the Athos flashpoint in the final boss encounter, at certain health percentages the boss disappears, and players need to avoid these unkillable living flames that chase a random player around. They can easily kill you and your party if ignored, but it's very easy to just kite the flames away. I thought it was cool that the dungeons felt dangerous when fighting the bosses, even if the mechanics themselves were relatively simple. It helped boost my engagement with the game and not resort to just brain off DPS tactics. MMOs, especially tab target ones, tend to have really easy early dungeons where you just kind of press 1 or 2 buttons, since that's usually all you have, while wailing on a static boss. So it's both refreshing and fun to fight an early game boss where you have to give some extra thought into the fight. Besides the bosses, each dungeon has optional bonus objectives to complete if your party's up to it. They're not obtuse things to do, they're mostly just kill specific enemies and interact with specific objects, but it's nice that the game gives you more to do here besides the main objective. The rewards and experience gained from dungeons are pretty juiced too. The XP gains were steady at low and high levels, and the gear that dropped for me was generally level appropriate, so it always felt rewarding to run flashpoints. But there's a huge fucking asterisk at the end of that statement, but more on that later. There haven't been a lot of times where I had to make a complicated choice of what gear to equip. Most of the things I've gotten were just direct upgrades, but the amount of stats that your character has makes it confusing to exactly what I should be gearing for in the long run. And the big 3 stats that they show you in the equip menu doesn't make it that much better either, because there's still minor stats that seem a bit superfluous. Like, I feel like the mastery and power stats can be combined and not a thing would change. This could be a new player issue, as I kind of had a similar feeling when I started playing Guild Wars 2 and was trying to parse out how the stats work and what effects there are. I'm hoping with more playtime and research I'll start getting a more intuitive feel for the gear. I talked a lot about instance content, and I feel some of the game's strongest moments come from that. But how's the open world? The open world takes you to sections of various planets in the Star Wars universe. The skyboxes and environments are so beautiful to look at, and there's a ton of variation. From forested areas to megacities to icy tundras, the devs don't fucking miss here. However, the open world is mostly just barren spaces, just kind of littered with enemies. There aren't secret areas to discover, and the busy skyboxes kind of hide how small the zones are. Don't get me wrong, the explorable areas are comparable in size to zones in Final Fantasy XIV. However, with this game, it's under the guise of being an entire planet, so it makes the zones feel smaller than what they actually are. It really doesn't help that there aren't many activities to do outside of the story instances in the zones. I think these zones make for great levels in a single-player game, giving cool places to explore while going through it for the story, but this game is an MMO, where you're sort of expected to come back, hang around, explore, and gather, but there isn't that much compelling content asking you to come back. Recently, there were dynamic events added to a bunch of planets, including the starter ones, that give you different objectives to do, ranging from just interacting to items, to killing enemies, to just killing a boss. I think the dynamic events are neat, but I don't think they're on the same scale as meta events from Guild Wars 2, or even Fates from Final Fantasy. Though I appreciate that the devs are still trying to add to and improve the new player experience, and it gives me hope for the game's future open world content.
That's one way to clear a battlefield.
The exploration of the Old Republic is one of the things that disappointed me the most, because this is fucking Star Wars. Now, I don't consume Star Wars content, like, at all, but I've learned enough about the franchise through cultural osmosis that I know there's so much source material to draw off of to make planets that seem populated, give cool points of interest, and have wacky events. But the most I got out of this game was enemies scattered around everywhere. After my first planet, I wasn't compelled to explore the worlds any more than I had to, and I found myself just mounting up and going from quest marker A to B without really absorbing the environment around me. Thinking about my first hours in Final Fantasy, the general atmosphere and quest placement gave me a drive to explore Gridania and the areas around it, and stumbling across Fates, although just static objectives, keyed me into looking out for events that are off the beaten path. And with Guild Wars 2, I felt even more attached to the world because the game was designed around its open world content. Every zone there rewards you for exploring, whether it's with items or XP, then there's mini dungeons, jumping puzzles, and other hidden content that you just find by exploring. Both of those games give you incentives to go off the beaten path, and the Old Republic has none of that. It's Star Wars. Fucking Star Wars. Why isn't there an event where stormtroopers start coming in on dropships and players need to just defend an area? Or the giant fucking whole mouth thing. I don't know. I don't watch Star Wars. This shit. Just anything really to keep the world interesting. I still want to play the game more for its story and combat experience, but I really hope the open world improves later on because it's still a big part of the game. The last topic I want to touch on is this game's monetization. The Old Republic is a free-to-try game with a subscription fee. The base game plus the first expansion are free to play. However, if you want to play past that, you'll need to subscribe at least once to access the rest of the game. Although you have access to a lot of the game, being free to play puts some restrictions on your account, such as not having bank access, having a credit cap of 1 million, reduced XP gains, and not being able to equip purple rarity gear. Remember that asterisk I talked about with dungeon rewards? Yeah, this is it. Of all the restrictions, I dislike the gear restrictions the most. It felt really annoying clearing of flashpoints and getting rewarded purple gear that I just couldn't equip. Granted, it was just leveling gear, so I wasn't missing out on much, but it was still frustrating to see an armor or weapon drop that's a huge upgrade in every stat. But it's grayed out with the red text saying you're not authorized to equip this. I think it's a lesser of many potential evils though. I was still able to get gear upgrades while playing, and if I'm trying to min-max, it's likely because I'm doing current content, which would require a sub anyways. The subscription costs around $15 US a month, and I think it's worth it, especially if you really want to get into the game. Despite my personal annoyances with the gear restrictions, the game doesn't make it annoying for you to play without a sub, so there's no pressure on you just trying the game out to see if you like it. The game also has a cash shop, but it seems to be mostly cosmetic. Personally, I don't care much about cosmetic cash shops so long as there's also cool sets to collect through gameplay. I haven't played enough to get a good sense for it, so this is another thing I'd like to hear more about from my Old Republic gamers in the comments. There are some items and upgrades you could pay for directly, like access to purple rarity gear, instant teleport to your starship, your home base and travel hub of sorts, and level boost. While the presence of these items itself is a bit problematic, it seems like a lot of the convenience upgrades that you could buy are just given to you as a subscriber. So it seems like these are just one-time alternate unlocks for you if you don't want to pay a monthly fee. I haven't personally engaged with the cash shop, so I'm not sure if the real prices are outrageous or not, but it seems like it isn't an egregious monetization avenue. The game doesn't shove it down your throat and constantly pester you with ads to buy things, and there's minimal bullshit to buy. I enjoyed my time playing the Old Republic. The story was super engaging, and I love the fully voiced campaign and dialogue trees. There's a surprising amount of roleplay present in just the campaign alone, which really helped me grow more attached to my characters. The combat was smooth, flowed nicely, and had great feedback. It made trying out new classes and learning rotations a lot of fun. The open world, while kind of empty, was still gorgeous to look at and take in. I was excited every time I was tasked to visit a new planet because I'd never know what kind of cool environment I'd be thrown in next. I'm thinking of playing this game more. I want to reach the endgame and experience raids, and when I do, I'll make a follow-up to this video. I think I'm still a bit of a ways away from that, so it'll be a while before that gets made. I have other videos planned in the meantime, so until then, stay safe.